My name is Meg Turner, and I'm coming to you direct from my home studio for OPA, Clay and Education. I'm here to show you how to work with clay using slab rolled clay, which is different from pinch pots and is also another way of working with clay. This year's theme is in the garden, and we are virtual this year only because of COVID. So I'm here to show you how to work with clay and create projects that you can use and enjoy at home. So for this project, you will need the following things. You will need a small table knife, which you might also have one of these. This is a knife tool. One of Mom and Dad's old credit cards works great. You'll also need a rolling pin and an apron of some kind is helpful. So I'm going to put my apron on real quickly so that I can be covered and protected in the event of any spills or hazards of any kind, accidents, whatever. You're going to need about 2 pounds of clay, which you can get from either Georgie's at 6th and Lombard or in North Portland, or you can also get it from Stark Street Studios on 39th and Stark Street. Okay, so you're going to start with about 2 pounds of clay. One other thing that I like to include is any kind of tools that you might have, which could be anything as simple as leaves or seed pods from your garden, or you might have something like this, which are stamps that look like cookie cutters. You might also try to find a stick like this one, which has a nice design on it. All of these things are designed to give you texture in working with the clay, and they help make working with clay more fun. So to start with, you're going to use your 2 pounds of clay, which should fit in your hands or in Mom and Dad's hands. This is older clay that I am repurposing, so mine's a little squishy. You want yours to be moist, but not quite as squishy as this is. And so this one got a little too wet. As you can see, it's kind of muddy. So you might want to let that dry for a few minutes and try something else. So let's go to, I'm going to come over here to the sink real quick and wash my hands. Get rid of that clay. And then I will try again with a different piece of clay. This brings out an important point, which is that when you're working with clay, you don't want to use too much water for slab rolling because it will turn to the texture that you saw with that first blob of clay that I was using. So try to use a small container of water that is only partially filled, about the size of this one here. And any table sponge or small kitchen sponge will work. And you're only going to use that for occasional moisturizing or softening of the clay as you're working with it. You will not need to use a lot of water. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to find a piece of clay. You will be picking up a piece of clay that from either Georgie's or Stark Street Studios, which has been pre-cut for you into a 2 pound block. With that block, you're going to come back to your house and you're going to use a rolling pin. This particular one is pretty large, but you can use any kitchen rolling pin. That's perfectly fine. And that will give you what you need to actually roll out the clay that you're going to get. It's going to come to you in a block, as I mentioned. Mine has been previously used, so it's not in a block form, so I'm just going to wedge it real quickly to get it that way. Okay, and then what you will notice as I'm wedging is that this helps push out any bubbles or other things that might make your clay pop when you go to fire it and explode. So using my rolling pin, I'm going to roll this clay out pretty much the way your mom does when she makes a pie crust or a pizza crust. So I'm going to just roll this out so it's nice and flat, like this. And notice I'm going to go from side to side, and I'm going to start in the middle of the clay and roll towards the other side. And then I'm going to pick it up and turn it around and do the same thing. I want, in my rolling, I'm aiming for a piece of clay that's about a ½ inch thick, which is about the size of a regular length fingernail. Okay, so I can choose to roll it out further if I want to make it thinner. That's perfectly fine. Or I can leave it a little thicker. Keep in mind that the more thickness you have, the harder it is to work with the clay and get it to shape into what you want to do with it. So thinner is actually better. Your clay needs to be about the texture of soft cheese, like cream cheese when you're working with it. This one's a little drier than that, but we're okay. Okay, so I'm going to take my credit card, wet it in water, and I'm just going to lightly stroke over the top of the clay. This is called compressing. This is another way to make sure that your clay is ready to work with and is going to stay together without exploding when you go to fire it in the kiln. You're going to turn it over and do the same thing to the back side. So now I have clay that has been what we call compressed, and that means with light pressure I have basically squeezed out all the extra bubbles and all the extra things that would make that clay not hold together or explode when I go to fire it in the kiln. Okay, so notice I'm using light pressure. I'm holding my clay, my wedge card, about at a 90-degree angle. And as I go across, I'm turning it sideways to about a 45-degree angle. Okay, and if you're not sure what that is, you can always ask Mom or Dad. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to put some texture in mine. So I'm going to take my piece of bark that I have, and I'm going to roll it across the clay. This is going to make my clay get thinner, and it's also going to give it a really nice, interesting textured pattern that it didn't have before I did this with the roller. So as you can see, it's now got a nice little texture to it. Okay, so once I have done that, I'm going to cut a wedge about 2.5 to 3 inches long, or wide, I should say, like this. And then I'm going to cut that further into the two edges of it. I'm going to cut at a 45-degree angle. So I'm not straight up and down like this, and I'm not side to side like this. I'm halfway in between those two. I'm going to cut one side like that, and then I'm going to turn my clay over, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating a surface which I can then take my card and make little cuts into. This is called a scoring. And this is going to give me a surface that I can then use to create the stem of my mushroom, because that's what I'm working on making right now. I like mushrooms. So I'm gonna squeeze the water out and just lightly put some water right here and some more water right here. Just enough to wet it a little bit, and then I'm gonna slightly bend it and get it around to the shape that I want. And then I'm gonna cross those two sides over where that edge is that I have cut. And the reason why I want to do that is because it's going to create a nice seam that I can use to close off my stem of my mushroom. And as you can see, once I smooth it down with my finger, I can't really tell where that seam was. This is going to help hold this together when I go to fire it, so that it stays in place and it doesn't explode. Okay? Now, I have created the stem. I can also go back onto the inside and do the same thing with the edge on the inside. Smooth it down using the handle of my table knife, which gives it a nice smooth surface on the inside and the outside where that seam is, and helps hold it together so that it doesn't fall apart. Okay? I'm going to smooth it down just a little bit more so that all my edges are sealed. Alright, now I'm going to set that aside, and while that's drying a little bit, I'm going to work on the top of my mushroom. Mushrooms are usually, the top of the mushroom is called a cap, and that's because it usually has kind of a rounded shape to it that makes it easy to fit over top of the stem. So I'm going to take the lid of my container to use as my cap. This is fairly flat, and it's about 3.5 inches wide. So I'm going to take that cap and I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to use it to cut, like a pattern, to cut the top of my mushroom out of the slab that I've rolled. Okay, so when I'm done, there's my cap. There's the top. And I'm going to take again my sponge, dip it lightly in the water, and go over that edge really gently, without a lot of water and without too much pressure, to smooth away any sharp edges. Because once this gets fired, it can make it very sharp and very dangerous to handle it. So I want to take away all of that sharpness and smooth it down. I can even practice squeezing it like this to make it flatter at the edge. Because as we know, mushrooms typically don't have a very thick excuse me, edge to them. Okay? So I've pretty much got a pancake here. Now I can take that pancake and I can slightly bend it from the middle to create kind of a oval or excuse me, rounded surface, which I could then place over top of this if I want, and bend it a little bit more to give it more of the shape that I'm looking for. Okay? And you can use a cap for yogurt containers. You can use any kind of container that you have in the kitchen that has a lid that can be taken off. It can be used to make your pattern for your cap. Okay? So here's my cap. It's pretty flat still. I want to let it dry a little bit more to give it a chance to get a little stiffer. When I'm done, it's going to go from the texture of cream cheese to a texture more like brick cheese, like cheddar cheese. So I'm just going to keep working with it, and I'm going to let it dry. And eventually I'm going to end up with something that is pretty hard, pretty firm to the touch. And I'm just going to take my card and I'm going to do that Same process that I did to join the seam together. I'm going to score the top of that stem where I want the cap to attach. So that's going to give me the edge where I can then take my sponge, wet it down, put a little bit of water on it to make it nice and moist. This will create the slip, it's called slip, that allows me to attach the cap onto the stem of the mushroom. Okay, now it's looking pretty flat right now, and most mushrooms usually aren't quite that flat. So I'm gonna maybe take my finger and create some little loops or sections that stick out at an angle. I might even ruffle it a little bit, because mushrooms, as we know, typically don't have one shape. They might have 2 or 3. Okay? Well, now I have my mushroom. It's ready to go. What I need to do at this point is I need to put it someplace safe, let it dry until it's fairly hard, or what we call leather hard, or even dry, bone dry. And that will allow me to move it from where I have made it to a place where I can have it fired. So the 2 places that we have set up for you guys are either at Stark Street Studios, and the other place is a place called Mount Hood Community College, which is in eastern Multnomah County in Troutdale. And we're going to have to meet off the campus because the campus is closed. So you're going to have to join me at the parking lot across the street, which is near a place called Gino's. That is the movie theater, the Royal Cinema, and it's on the corner of Stark and Kane Street in Troutdale. In order to set that time up for us to meet, I'm going to ask you to write to me at heartsongceramics@gmail.com. That's my personal email. And then you're going to arrange a time that works for me and for you. And then you will come, drop it off into the back of my 2010 Forester Subaru. And we won't even have to meet each other or do anything else. You can just drop it off in the box, leave it there for me, and I will take it over across the street to the studio on campus where it will be bisque fired for you. And then approximately a week later, we're going to do the same thing. This time you're going to pick it up. If you want to paint it, you can certainly do that. That process is usually called glazing because it is using something called glazes to make that happen. However, in the interest of saving time and trips back and forth for everyone, what we're going to do is have you go to either Michael's or any craft store where you can buy acrylic paints, and you can paint it with acrylic paints because those don't need to be fired. And that will give you a finished product. When your bisqueware comes back to you, it will be hard, just like this rolling pin. And it may be a different color, depending on the clay that you actually use. Some clay fires to bisqueware at a white color, other clays fire a different color. So depending on which clay you actually use, you may have one of those 2 colors. But as long as it's hard to the touch, you can paint over it with acrylics and you will have a finished product that you can keep from that point on. Another project that I have made before with students is to make garden art, which could be anything that is in the garden. So you could make flowers with this, you could make butterflies, you could make small animals, if you have small animals in your garden that come and go, like bunny rabbits or things of that sort. Okay, so you're just going to keep working with that clay and keep rolling it around just like you're making a pizza pie or a pie crust. And then you can use, if you don't have cookie cutters, you can make a pattern out of a tag board or like a vanilla folder and use that and cut around it. Or if you have cookie cutters like this one, then you can take your cookie cutter and use that cookie cutter to create your shape. I'm using a star for mine. And this is just an idea, okay? And then you're going to let that dry. And once it's dry, then you can take it and have it bisque fired, just like your other piece, okay? Notice I'm wiping off the edges again, just like I did the mushroom, so that my edges are smooth, because I don't want those rough edges, because they're just like glass. They can tear my skin. So I'm going to take my star now, and I'm going to let it dry, and when I'm ready, I'm going to bisque fire that, and then I can paint it any color that you want, okay? So there is no right or wrong way to do this. Your imagination is the only thing that limits you, and I would encourage you to have as much fun as you can with this. If you are interested in working with the clay and getting some of this clay from Star Street Studios, you can contact Teresa Vaughn. That's TeresaVaughn. And her email is not one that I remember right off the top of my head. So your best bet is to contact me at Heart Song Ceramics. That's HeartSongCeramics, all one word, Heart Song Ceramics, at gmail.com. I can get you set up with the clay, I can get you set up with the place to bisque fire it, and then I can arrange for you to come and pick it up for me, and you will then be able to use all that you have created with your acrylics to make your finished product. So have fun, enjoy yourselves. Think about the things you might have in your yard too, like seed pods or flowers or leaves or anything that might be handy in your yard that could be used to create that same texture that we did with this rolling stick. So it doesn't have to be a preset pattern. It can be one that you create yourself, and you just use your rolling pin and roll that into the clay, the body of the clay, after you've got it smooth, and that will help press it into the clay and create a pattern for you that way. So there really is no right or wrong way to do this. Have fun, enjoy yourselves. We really look forward to seeing what you finish with. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Have fun.